Merry Christmas and Happy New Year! I have another video for you guys on how I painted our beautiful celestial moon. So grab your coffee, tea, or whatever beverage of your choosing and prepare to watch the video. First things first, we're starting with a fresh gessoed wood canvas that I already prepped before the video. And then I'm adding on my clay layer. So with this material that I'm using, it does sometimes have lumps in it, so of course I have to go ahead and mix it up really well. So I'm just using my palette knife to make sure I'm getting more of a smooth surface before I begin to paint with the application. I spend a lot of time in this stage. Even if you're not doing the same artwork that I'm doing, when you are working on your base, you do want to spend a fair amount of time making sure it is prepped appropriately, that there's no lumps in the material that you're using, and in just making sure that everything is combined cohesively too, because all of those things can make some issues further on if you don't make sure you do that. So it's really funny that now that I'm looking at this video while I'm doing this voiceover, I see how much this looks like a cake. It's really funny. It looks like I'm icing a cake, but of course I'm not. We're painting and we're in the real world. So anyway, what I'm continuing on to do now is etch out the forms of the moon. So the tool that I'm using is from Master Touch. It's one of their silicone shapers, I guess would be the more correct name of what it is. But I found like these just shopping one day, stumbling on into the store, and of course, with how I normally am, I tend to find things and pick them up. So this is one of the many tools that I just ended up picking up, looking at it one day and realizing, this would be a better thing to actually use when I'm actually carving out my artworks. But they do have different sizes, just like brushes, but they have like the smallest size that you can get like more details. And then they do have some bigger ones, but they have different silicone brushes from a point to more of a sharper edge and some other little interesting features that they have. But I really enjoy using these, and it helps me just save some of the material too that I'm using, because if you really want to, like after I'm picking up these areas and everything, I could put that back into the original container that I took the material out of. But sometimes I don't do that because it's really not worth it. But you know, if you're using a palette knife, that's definitely something you can do to just save some money and not waste any. So while I'm etching out these little areas, I am of course looking at an image of the moon on my left side, just making sure I can get more of an idea of how it's supposed to be. Because if I really wanted to make this super accurate, of course I could do that. I've of course have the history of doing that. I do have the training to do that, but I really prefer more of a representation of the moon rather than the actual precise areas of it. Because let's be real, if we really wanted to be 100% accurate, in my personal opinion, I could have a photo. I could have a photo instead of having the painting itself. That just defeats the purpose for me. Let me know how you feel on that. Do you feel that artists should really be super photorealistic when it comes to their artworks? Or do you feel that a photo would suffice? I mean, I think before, you know, it maybe mattered then before technology was how it was. But I don't know. It's just something about art where artists can capture something that a photo could never really exactly capture. And I mean, that's why I feel it's so much better to just have the emotions and how it looks as is without just having it so photorealistic. To me, it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, now I'm just showing off my abilities, and I personally don't feel that I need that personally. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but thought it would be a little nice discussion that we could touch on while we're going over me painting, or actually more so sketching this into the artwork itself. I don't know. Just comment below what you think on it, but probably some food for thought. Nice thing to go into. So I'm just going to block in a few more areas, as you can see in the video, add in a few more of the little dots that are the craters of the moon, some more little squigglies, I guess if you'd want to call those, that I kind of tend to do in a lot of my artworks. but I just really want to flesh it out as best I can before I add any more in-depth details. Aha! So here we are. We're on another form where I have already blocked in the back of the moon itself, and now I'm just going in and adding some darker and lighter details. Typically, like when you do artworks like this, like just in any principle, you do add in your darks and your lights. Typically you do that with like a darker color, like maybe more a gradient, but I made it a little bit more of a bronze and a beige just because I feel it adds a little bit more warmth to the gray. I noticed just doing some tests before adding just strictly gray, it just made it very, very extremely dull. And so in my practice, I just figured that adding more of a bronze and more of like a neutral beige just gives a little bit more life to the artwork itself because it is flat. Yes, I did like go ahead and draw it in there, like some of the little divots and whatnot, but just the beige and the bronze gives it a little bit more light. But I did add metallic colors, which is something I really have enjoyed doing, is using some metallic colors from Arteza. I think that's how you say the brand itself, but I've been enjoying those. Of course, I still do use colors that are not metallic within the artwork itself too. So I will use more of a titanium white, and if I do need to use like a darker color just to make the color itself darker, I will use a little bit of black. But I do try to stay away from black because I feel that you can get the same effects if you use just a darker tone of something like the bronze, like I was saying. So that's just my tip. I know some artists have their own things in their own way of doing things, but I personally try not to use so much black. I do use a lot of blue in my practice, but I do try to stay away from black as much as I can when it comes to me painting myself, because I don't think it needs to go that deeply dark in my artworks, but to each their own. I will say this, that is a great tip that every artist should do. If you don't do it, take a break. Take a break when it comes to creating your painting. I know, of course, you're seeing the video and there are no breaks because it's just a video that I edited together, but do take some time to step away from the artwork itself. Many a days while I was in college, I would just work when it came out because I had, of course, a deadline, but I wouldn't take the time to step away from my painting. And also I was painting at night. So I really didn't adapt a practice to tell when I've mixed maybe the wrong colors or I'm not seeing something 100% correctly. And I probably, of course, could have seen that if I've taken a break, if I let the painting breathe itself, because it's one of those things where you keep seeing something or you're reading that's a perfect explanation. If you're reading your paper, for instance, and your brain is automatically fixing the misspellings or the crap grammar because you're not reading it out loud, you don't catch it. And it's not until someone else reads your paper and they're like, I mean, you know that you spelled apple wrong, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even notice that. So, as it is with writing, you read your paper in reverse. You read it from the back to the front to go ahead and see some misspellings. Well, it's kind of the same concept when it comes to painting. You just need to walk away from it, take a break, and then when you come back to it, you see it in a whole new light because you've given yourself some time to see those mistakes that you've had. Or, if that's not really your thing either and you just don't want to do that, have a friend that can look it over. Even if there's someone that's not an artist themselves, people can still see what looks right and what looks wrong. They might not be able to tell you what it is that they're seeing that's jacked up, but they will be able to tell you something does not look right. And then sooner or later, you will catch on to that as well too. So that's just my little art tip that I wanted to bring up while I'm still creating, because I do that a lot. I take a lot of breaks from my artwork, maybe not too long, like I was saying, but I take time to give the painting some time to breathe, where I can see what needs to be fixed, what maybe needs to be a little bit lighter, what maybe could be a little bit darker. Those are just some great tips that I've learned that really help and make a difference down the line. Okay, circling back around on something I completely forgot to touch on after the first stage, a tool that I do like to use to get some of the texture of the moon includes, it's like a little sponge that's from Arteza. I love that brand. I have no idea if they're still operating completely, but I did buy a lot of materials from them. But it is Art, A-R-T, with an actual C. Their little sponge is like it's like a black sponge, and it has a handle on it. It's really great for adding in textures to, like, if you have like a molding paste, like from any brand, or if you have even a clay. I've even used it on clay to make some textures. It's a really great tool to have if you are like more of a mixed media artist. It's a really great tool to use within your artworks as well too. But that's how I've gotten a lot of the divots, outside of me actually sketching some of them in by hand with that Master Touch shaper that I mentioned before. That's the silicone one. But now I'm using a detail brush that's also from Master Touch. If you haven't noticed, I really like them. Of course, no, I'm not being sponsored, but maybe you should. If you are listening to this, Master Touch, that would be lovely. But moving on, I'm just adding in a few details using this really fine detail brush, adding in some lighter areas, because if you look at the moon in pictures of it, I mean, of course you can't see it when you're actually outside, let's say at night looking, but in a picture of it you do see like some streaks that the moon has more so. I'm not 100% sure if that's really on the moon or if that's like an effect of it. If you're a scientist and you're listening to this, do let me know. Comment below. I love information. But I'm just adding in some of those details and refining those in just to add some more touches to it. When I'm painting, I try not to go too overboard with the details. I just like adding in like little choice places where I would like to add in some of my details, because like I was saying, I could get really super realistic, but I just don't think it's so necessary to go completely overboard with it. So I just add in little choice places of where I would want to add the details, more so the places that really stick out in the photo, because you can have like some really tiny small ones, but that's just a little too much, because with the texture that I have and then the etchings that I have, I don't think I need to go that far overboard. And it does get to a point where you can completely overwork your painting as well, and I just don't see the point of that personally for myself. That doesn't mean I don't appreciate it for other people, but when I go to do my own, I just don't think it's that important. But now I'm adding in something else which kind of adds a little bit more details, which is going to be the golden mica flakes. If you haven't used those, I would suggest really getting them at your local art store. They're really fun to use, but it just adds like some actual sparkle to the painting, because those mica flakes, if you don't know, they are really reflective. And it's actual natural mica flakes within this artwork that are non-harmful, you know, as long as you don't ingest or any crazy superficial things like that. But it just adds like some really cool reflective light into the artwork itself. So this was the final stage I had for the artwork. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching what I'm doing, and see what I'm going to do next month. I have a lot in store. Bye.